Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 6, Teach/Corrupt. If you can manage to stop drooling for 1 second over this disrobed murderer, there are actually some fascinating clues and connections and details that you missed in this episode, including, I suppose, some details specifically about the physique of this disrobed murderer. But let's break down this episode shot by shot to explain whether this planet could be Ahch-To or someplace cooler from Legends, whether Qimir got those scars from Vernestra's light whip, and the secret of the Cortosis. And a reminder that the best way to support New Rockstars is with an Acolyte-themed shirt at nerdriot.shop, like our awesome Peace is a Lie shirt, or something else from our Star Wars collection. Actually, from now through the end of July 4th weekend, we are doing 30% off site-wide. So jump on this opportunity right now over at nerdriot.shop. Okay, we open this episode with Osha, and we know it's her from the mech tattoo, sitting up awake with the same camera tilt as when she woke up in episode 1. They're reusing the same camera movement that they used to introduce Osha in episode 1, making me feel like we are seeing kind of a reawakening, a reset for the character as she embarks on this new beginning on a journey of self-discovery with these dark side entities. This cave abode has spa-like pools, a pot of stew a-cooking, and toiletries on the side table. Now, Qimir did not take these along for his supposed bath, so I assume these might be nightly face creams or any other kind of lotions a guy living alone might keep on his nightstand. Either way, this Manny cave is far more chill than the typical brutalist hooded fire monk vibe of most other Sith, right? And that could tell us something that we'll get to later in this breakdown. But the wound we saw on Osha's side at the end of episode 5 has been bandaged. At the time, it looked as though that Sith might have been forced healing the wound, but the bandages are still bloody here, so I don't think it was a complete force heal. Osha sees this little anteater-nosed fella trembling beside the bag. These are called Skura, according to Star Wars' website. We see a family of them later, maybe even this same baby reunited with his parents. They use their snouts to forage between the rocks, and then they all freeze to camouflage with the rocks when Osha passes. I assume that the name Skura comes from the word obscure, which is thematically on brand with this mystery planet. Their gray leathery skin and snouts, you might say, looks a bit like the color scheme and the anatomy of the Thala Sirens of Ahch-To in The Last Jedi. You know, Luke's favorite milk bar. I don't know, maybe Skura are part of the same order, class, or family of animals. It's kind of hard to group animals that way when one is so large and one is more like rodent-like. So, is this planet Ahch-To or Ahch-To? There's just never been agreement on how exactly to say it. You know, the ocean world and unknown regions where Luke Skywalker took exile in the sequels? I don't think it is, because there are no Porgs, no Thala Sirens, no Lene, and while the Porgs could have been seasonal or migratory to that island, the Thala Sirens and Lene looked like they were year-round residents and did not seem to be recent invasive species. Like, those Thala Sirens, you know, had some ass grooves in those rocks. Now, the island they shot Ahch-To on was Skellig Michael. This island is the Portuguese island of Madeira off the coast of Morocco in the Atlantic Ocean. It's the same island whose forest interiors were used for Kofar, and another peninsula on a different part of the island was used for that establishing shot of Ueda. This shore is a part of Madeira called Canassal, a point called Ponta de Sao. And in many background shots, you can actually see other land masses through the fog that did not match what we saw in Ahch-To. This episode calls the planet Unknown Planet, like they really want us to know it is unknown. They took the effort to put a text establishing title on it. I think this planet could be Bal'demnic, an ocean planet with rocky tropical islands. Bal'demnic first appeared in the 2003 Star Wars Clone Wars animated series Chapter 22 episode, which is technically no longer canon, but like everything in Legends, it's all back on the table now. The writer who named the planet derived the name Bal'demnic from the word condemn, while also making it similar to demonic, suggesting that the planet's inhabitants were not as innocent as they might have appeared. The planet also appeared in the Darth Plagueis novel by James Luceno, and the supplemental article The Tenebrous Way by Matthew Stover, and Book of Sith Secrets of the Dark Side by Daniel Wallace. It's known to be a rich mine of Cortosis. Actually, in Luceno's book, Tenebrous and Plagueis came to Bal'demnic originally to investigate a load of Cortosis ore, and it is here where Plagueis kills Tenebrous. With Cortosis playing such a big role with Qimir and his helmet, this planet could be Bal'demnic. Later in Qimir's cave abode, the walls seem to be lined with Cortosis ore. I actually think this entire facility is or was a Cortosis mine. So Osha puts on what I assume are some of May's clothes and walks out to see the rocky shoreline. Of course, this is the same beach where at the end of episode 1, May met her Sith master and he said,
"An acolyte. kills the dream.
You can see Kymir's thinned starship parked on one of the rocky islands, so he must have flown Osha here after taking her from Kofar when he said, "What extraordinary beings we are. Even in the revelation of our triumph, you see the depths of our despair." And in that moment, we heard the Kylo Ren theme, and that music actually returns in this episode if you listen closely when Osha is gazing at the Cortosis helmet. Showrunner Leslie Headland has confirmed in an interview with Inverse that the inclusion of Kylo Ren's theme music was intentional, but at the time she could not say yet what that reason was. So I still like the theory that Qimir could be trying to break away from both the Jedi and the Sith and start a new order that will be called the Knights of Ren. He would be the first scratch-masked Ren of that line of succession. Meanwhile, Sol pilots his Polan transport ship away from Kofar and calls the Jedi Temple. A Jedi named Mog Adana, played by actor Harry Trevaldwin, answers the call.
There's been my whole team is dead.
What was Sol gonna say? There has been an accident? A massacre? A Sith sighting? Like, why stop himself mid-sentence? Does he harbor some shame for his own scandal of leaving a loose end with a Sith out there that could come back to haunt him and his fellow Jedi? But the fact that Sol does not say the word Sith here in this call is just another way that this show is going to keep the Sith a secret from the broader Jedi Order. So May, disguised as Osha, but in a dirtier version of the light-colored civilian robes, surveys the ship interior.
May. In this test, you must divine what images appear on the testing screen.
So back in episode 3, we did not see May's test inside that ship, and it sounds like it might have been Indara who administered the test, whereas for Osha, it was Sol who administered the test. Sol throws his arms around May. I want to put forth the hypothesis that Sol might know this is actually May the entire time. Does he know? It might just be that Sol is clouded by guilt, or even some part of him sees May as an equally redeemable Brendok sister worthy of his protection. I think he might at least suspect that this is not Osha earlier than we think in the episode. Sol resets the transceiver, and on the monitor you can see 2 red circles showing a signal blockage, but then once he reboots it, it's all blue with 1 solid red circle showing that the signal is repatched. But while he waits for this reboot, Lee Jung-jae just lets himself spiral into despair. Like, in his eyes, you just see fear leading to anger, leading to hate, leading to suffering. Like, imagine when you have to reset your Wi-Fi router and you find yourself suddenly in a quiet moment without any technology to distract you, and it's in those little moments where you start to hear your own breathing, your own heartbeat, and your own voices. And I like that they use this to stage this quiet little moment for Sol. Meanwhile, Bazil, the Tanan, is creeping around with Pip's droid head and finds a docking station to recharge it. And I love that Pip can beep while Bazil, through his own language, nods and is able to respond. Like, both are able to connect now, and they've come a long way from Pip spraying Bazil in the face with water. Osha follows Qimir to a tide pool and watches as he disrobes. Okay, so a little peek behind the scenes at my process breaking down videos. My second or third pass is always watching these episodes with the audio description on, because sometimes, you know, that reveals deeper context or details, and you have to listen to the audio description for this part.
As he begins to untie a belted knot from around his waist, she straightens up for a better look. He begins to undress, revealing a prominent scar on his well-toned back. Dropping his billowy-legged hakama pants, he steps forward with the sunlight accentuating his taut muscles.
Okay, so obviously the point of audio descriptions is to give us as accurate a description of the visuals as possible. But this kind of reads like a 50 Shades of Grey audiobook, and I have no problem with it, but it just makes me so happy because someone somewhere in this production process gave the note to whatever the script was gonna be here of make sure to include that his back is well toned. Also, we need to establish that he is wearing hakama pants, you know, trousers that are frequently worn with kimonos. The clear subtext of the scene is that Qimir knows he is being watched, and I think he wants to use that seduction as part of his plan to manipulate her. Okay, let's talk about the scar. Osha asks about this later.
Where'd you get that scar?
How do you think I got it?
Looks like someone stabbed you in the back.
Someone who threw me away.
Your Jedi Master?
Notice how Qimir does not explicitly answer the question. He doesn't confirm it was a Jedi that gave it to him, he just said it was someone who threw him away. But we have to say, no, Osha, it does not look like someone stabbed Qimir in the back. It looks like someone sliced or lashed or burned him. But you know, I get the figure of speech to indicate someone betrayed him. And secondly, yes, I think we're all assuming that this scar was formed by Vernestra Rwoh's light whip, which we get an amazing action shot of this episode. The idea that Vernestra whipped and burned Qimir on his back like this would be a very dark reveal for Vernestra Rwoh, a beloved character from the High Republic novels. Some readers have wondered if she might grow up to be a Sith. In this case, not quite, but a corrupt Jedi Master, perhaps. But in case this show wants to spare Vernestra's reputation, these lashings could have been given to Qimir by a second mentor figure that he fled to after being cast out by the Jedi, by Tenebris or by Plagueis. Just always beware the rebound who scoops you up when you're at your most vulnerable, folks. They might treat you even worse, because at that point, you're just easier to manipulate. Being burned by both the Jedi and the Sith might be why Qimir now wants to start a new order, if that Knights of Ren theory is correct. But here by the tide pool, Osha goes for Kymir's lightsaber and he says,
"Feels good, doesn't it? To hold one in your hand again."
Okay, Qimir, we see what you're doing there. And just another audio description moment that I have to point out later when Osha puts the red lightsaber right up to his throat, they use the word throbbing.
He gently takes hold of her arm, the red blade still throbbing right in front of his throat.
But here, standing nude before her, he says,
"I'm wondering if it's honorable to kill me like this. Heat of battle, it's justified. But a few hours later, it's vengeance."
Obviously, being naked in front of her is like part of his manipulation, right? Like in Game of Thrones, we saw Jaime Lannister do this with Brienne of Tarth. But with this line, Qimir is questioning the Jedi code and the rules of combat. Like truly, what difference does it make if you kill an enemy when he's actively fighting you versus any other point? If in the future, he could still end up killing you. Qimir then says,
"Now you're wondering how I can read your mind. I can't. Not exactly. Your anger betrays your thoughts."
So here we're returning to this idea of the Sith being able to invade someone's mind, as are the Jedi. Like Yor described this last episode, and May experienced it when the helmet of Qimir flashed in the color red as she was running through the trees. This anger that Osha feels was actually sparked in her by Qimir when he told Sol that he needed to confess the secrets of what really happened on Brendok, and he made sure to say that right in front of Osha last episode. Qimir now changes into lighter robes, leaving Osha as the darker dressed of the two. That feels like an intentional manipulation by Qimir, who knew that Osha was following him. Like his whole plan here was to make himself vulnerable, to stage this kind of seduction, to performatively absolve himself of sin in these cleansing waters, and now he's wearing a lighter shade that makes him look like, hey, a good guy, you can trust me. Since Osha was knocked out for the final moments of that episode, she asks if he killed Sol, and then asks if he killed May.
Interesting you ask about him first, though. A special relationship, isn't it? Master and pupil?
He does not say Jedi and Padawan, he says master and pupil, so that he could easily swap that into Sith and Acolyte, or something else in Acolyte. It's all semantics, right? He's definitely trying to seduce Osha to the dark side and make her the Acolyte that May failed to be. Does New Rockstars love movies? Yes. Do we love TV? Yes. Is there something we love even more though? Yes, it's our dogs, which is why we feed them Sundays for Dogs. Sundays is fresh dog food made from a short list of human-grade ingredients. It's 90% meat, 10% vegetables, and 0% synthetic nutrients. We've got a whole pack of dog stars, including Hank, Bubba, Jeff, Tilda, Gigi, and of course, Darla. We're obsessed with our dogs and we want to make sure they're as happy and healthy as possible. Since giving our dogs Sundays, we've noticed a ton of improvements in their health, softer fur, fresher breath, better poops, and more energy. Sundays doesn't require refrigeration or preparation because it's air dried. You just pour and serve. If you're taking your dog on the road or on a trip, it's super easy to take some with you. Every order of Sundays ships right to your door, so you never have to worry about running out, which is convenient for me and perfect for Darla. Get 50% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/newrockstars or use code newrockstars at checkout. Meanwhile, the Jedi ship redocks with its hyperspace engine in Kofar's orbit, and Sol says,
It's time for me to face the High Council, to tell them everything.
Everything?
Yes, he is including what really happened that night on Brendok, but the power cuts out and Sol sends May to take a look. I assume that it was Bazil who got the power to separate May from Sol. Back on Coruscant, we see the Jedi Temple from a lower angle, which includes its various ship hangar depots and demonstrates how this used to be a towering structure on Coruscant before the rest of the cityscape built up around it, which is just like an interesting reflection of the Jedi Order. Despite the evolving social norms, the Jedi just kind of like never evolved with the times. Master Vernestra chats with Chewant, a senator in the High Republic who discusses the ambitious Senator Rancourt, who gains support for an external review of the Jedi Order, with senators in the expansion region planning to vote in favor of that review. Clearly, Vernestra does not want this oversight, which makes us wonder how many other Qimirs and Oshas and Splinter Orders and massacres have there been under her watch. Senator Chewant is an Abednego race, a species created for The Force Awakens to include characters like Elo Asti, which J.J. Abrams named after the Beastie Boys album Hello Nasty. The name Chewant carries that Beastie Boys tradition. It's derived from the Beastie Boys' So What You Want. Qimir reveals that he did used to be a Jedi.
A long time ago.
I've never heard of you.
It was a really long time ago.
So how old is Qimir? The Mirialan Vernestra Rwoh is over 100 years old, but the implication of this line is that he's even older than that. Like, we're getting some Edward Cullen vibes here.
How long have you been 17?
A while.
And if he's far older than 100 years old, it would suggest that whoever his former Jedi Master was might be someone who even predates Vernestra. I actually think he left the Jedi Order for similar reasons as Osha. Like, if it were some big dramatic walkout, they would have remembered that, right? I think he was just one of many Jedi who just didn't make the cut. But from that, he found the Sith, and through his association with Darth Plagueis or Darth Tenebrous, might have unlocked some secrets of staving off death and extending his life. Osha says that Soul strength in the Force will lead him to her, but Qimir corrects her that it's actually her strength in the Force, and someone should teach her that. So we're seeing a paradigm shift here with Osha. It's not the Jedi's advanced perception that leads them, it's really the target's vibe, their aura, their stink, you could say, that's so overpowering that it really just screams in the Jedi's faces, hey, look, someone else like you. Qimir's basically saying we're all overvaluing the Jedi's advanced perception. Behind Osha, the rocky bridge juts out toward the beach, so she could make that short swim to the ship, but Qimir left her intrigued enough to stay. Meanwhile, May checks out the engine room where Bazil ambushes her with some hilarious fighting poses. Pip causes an engine valve to spit grease in Osha's eyes, and because this is like a Home Alone prank, Amanda lets out this hilarious scream. May resets Pip to factory settings, holding down the front and the side buttons as if shutting down an iPhone. So does that mean all of his memories of Osha are gone? Oh no! His two white eyes reset to red, which is what happened to C-3PO's eyes in The Rise of Skywalker when they reset him so that he could speak the Sith language. Qimir tells Osha that the Jedi teach that there's only one way to access the Force, and that if you don't do it their way, it will fade, but that's a lie. He goes on.
Below the surface of consciousness are powerful emotions. Anger, fear, loss, desire.
And yes, on the word desire, he totally takes a moment to lock eyes with her. Osha responds,
That's the path to the dark side.
Semantics.
The way Qimir brushes it off is similar to the way Palpatine brushes off Anakin's worrying about the dark side in Revenge of the Sith. Qimir saying semantics is also a way of saying the Force and the thread are just two words for the same thing. And we'll see, if Qimir is the first Ren, they call the dark side of the Force the shadow. So, you know, it's just all semantics. Osha accuses Qimir of killing the Jedi, killing Yord, killing Jeki, and Qimir rightly points out that Yord wanted to turn her in, and her relationship with Jeki, which was confirmed by actor Daphne Keane to be intentionally flirty, was actually just one-sided.
Why do you love people who can only go so far? Who can't go as deep as you can?
Who can't go as deep. This is the third time this episode that Qimir has alluded to Osha taking a swim. First to skinny dip with him in the tidal pool, then to swim out to the ship on the island, and now to take this metaphorical plunge with him. Qimir steps directly into the emitter of his lightsaber in Osha's hand.
Turn it on.
Okay, Qimir. He is encouraging her to use the lightsaber combat form of Trakata, which is a tactic of quickly switching the blade on and off to confuse your opponent. This is the kill move that he used on Jeki in episode 5, and it's a very popular form with a number of characters that the Acolyte team made sure to include for Qimir back last episode. Qimir tells Osha that the pain and anger she feels is who she is, and it's why the Jedi threw her away. Osha's defensive to this, but remember, it was Master Vernestra who gave Osha her harshest notes. He now forces her to hold the lightsaber emitter right under his chin so that lighting it would impale his head.
Why aren't you a Jedi, Osha?
Because I failed!
I like this detail that at the tip of the saber closer to camera, you can see how much the blade is shaking, expressing Osha's instability now that Qimir has broken through. Qimir says,
But when you lose everything, that's when you're finally free.
and he places his hand on her arm, not to restrain her, but really in an affectionate way. Master Vern decides to join Mog's crew to Kofar, and once again, we see the Selkath Gate Officer. This is an aquatic species from the planet Manan, originally introduced in Knights of the Old Republic. We learn that Vernestra gets nauseous when traveling through hyperspace. This is rooted in her youth when it was explored in the High Republic novels like Light of the Jedi, an earlier part of the High Republic period when hyperspace lane charting was still a newer, more precarious process, of course leading to the great hyperspace disaster, and this is always something that Vernestra has just struggled with. Now in the background, we see Vernestra's ship parked with the yellow trim. According to the Star Wars site, this is called the Kantaros, named after Vernestra's former Padawan, Imri Kantaros, in the High Republic books. Meanwhile, Sol's ship, the Polan, was named after one of Leslie Headland's friends who passed away before the series debut. Sol wonders how he couldn't have sensed Kymir's intentions back when they first met him on Olega, and May responds,
When you really want something, it can cloud your mind. You see what you want to see. He fooled us all.
You found him. Your pip droid.
I think this is the moment when Sol's suspicions are confirmed. The lights are now back on, and the blue haze that Sol had fallen into is lifted, and he's able to see her in her true light, and when she darts away from him, he knows for sure, and he stuns her. The Jedi are now able to communicate over the transponder.
Master Sol, the rescue team is on their way. Leave your transponder on.
So Sol turns off his transponder and leaves right before the Jedi arrive. Does he now want to hide the truth from them? Was him claiming to want to come clean to the High Council earlier his attempt to flesh May out and confirm his suspicion about her? Or is he just leaving right now to protect May because he knows the Jedi will take her? And I like this detail how Sol jumps in hyperspace and just a second later Vernestra's ship arrives from hyperspace. Yeah, her fears of hyperspace sharding were very nearly confirmed. These two almost collided with each other. But it also reminds me of the shot at the end of Rogue One when the Rebel fleet tried to jump into hyperspace, but some were cut off by Darth Vader's arriving Star Destroyer. Qimir repairs his Cortosis helmet. Remember, Jecki elbowed it so hard last episode that she broke off the back part. Osha asks,
What do you want?
The power of two.
So it sounds like he's implying the Sith rule of two. He wants a new acolyte to help him overthrow his Sith master. But the power of two, remember, is also the middle part of the chant of the Witches of Brendok that Osha grew up in. The power of one, the power of two, the power of many. I'm thinking that the Sith, Tenebris and Plagueis, or maybe Plagueis and Qimir, originally set up those witches on Brendok and gave them that power to create life in Mother Coral's womb. But Qimir may have admired the different approach of the Splinter Order. And that's why he's always been partial to these twins. Qimir gives us more information about Cortosis.
Cortosis, handy against lightsabers, but also a sensory deprivation headpiece, like we used as younglings.
Okay, so we talked last week about how Cortosis is a lightsaber disabling metal from Knights of the Old Republic and things like Jedi and Darth Bane Path of Destruction, but this is the first time it's been described additionally as a sensory deprivation material used in youngling helmets. We saw those helmets on younglings in the Jedi Temple and Yoda's class in Attack of the Clones. That might also explain why Yoda was okay letting those kids have lightsabers out and up. Like if their blades were to bonk a nearby helmet, the blade would short out. But this also suggests that it's really the Kyber crystal, which connects to the Jedi's thoughts, that the Cortosis is reacting with. That's why Qimir is able to use this other tool to weld it, because it's not just like any hot plasma that it shorts out, it's specifically the magic of the Kyber crystal. So this sensory deprivation is what Qimir was referring to when he told Sol that removing the helmet would let Sol into his thoughts. It also tells us that Qimir was fighting physically blind and deaf, using only the Force, which is incredible, but another example of appearances being deceiving. And it reminds us of how Obi-Wan made Luke block his vision with a blast visor while training on the Millennium Falcon. And of course, Kanan Jarrus became blind in Rebels, but really the Force was all he needed. Osha asks,
It blocks out all your senses?
So it's just you and the Force, and what you bring with you.
This line is a reference to Yoda's line in The Empire Strikes Back when he told Luke to go into the cave, a dominion of evil.
What's in there?
Only what you take with you.
And remember, Yoda told Luke that he would not need weapons in that cave, which is similar to Kymir's final lesson, to kill a Jedi without weapons. As Osha contemplates the Cortosis helmet, of course the Kylo Ren music returns, but it takes us to this horrible jump scare. Dead Jecki! The edit suggests that this path that Osha is flirting with is the same path that led to her friend getting trakated 3 times in the chest. Vernestra also finds Yord and the others. And then she hears sounds from Sol's voice. It It seems like Vernestra is using psychometry, the Jedi ability to scan a location for memories and sounds. This was a skill used by Quinlan Voss, and we actually saw Ahsoka Tano do it in episode 2 of that series. And then Vernestra ignites her light whip to slice the Umbermoth in half. This light whip is something young Vernestra used in the High Republic novels, and it's really a function that she can customize into her hilt, like using it in saber mode or whip mode. The speed with which she cracks this whip, though, without even looking, feels like a Lucasfilm nod to Harrison Ford in Raiders of the Lost Ark when he uses the bullwhip to smack the pistol out of the hand of the traitorous guide. Mog asks,
"You don't think Master Soul was responsible?"
That is quite the accusation.
And Vernestra wonders.
Something to tip the scales.
Echoing her fear back in episode 4 when she sent Soul to Kofar. I don't think Vern thinks Soul is responsible, but I think she remembers the Padawan who was cast out and she always worried would come back to haunt her. And for now, she's okay with Mog thinking that it was just Soul's doing. Like she may end up trying to blame this on Soul. And as they leave, we hear Vernestra say,
"It's time to get back to the ship. We should prepare these bodies for burial."
Ha! It kind of sounds like an ADR line, like something they had the actor record later when they realized that these two groups of Jedi left behind the bodies of their fallen comrades. May wakes up restrained by Soul, suggesting that what he's going to tell her about the night of Brendok is going to send her in a murderous rage.
I've had 16 years to think about what I would say to you if I ever got the opportunity.
So you're going to listen.
Meanwhile, Osha traces her fingers on the cracks in the cortosis of the helmet, and she stares transfixed at its eerie, sinister smile, as if governed by a force or a thread. To escape the overwhelming pain and rage she feels, she welcomes the sensory deprivation inside that helmet, and we see this plunge into darkness from her point of view. It echoes the lowering of Darth Vader's mask onto his face in Revenge of the Sith when he breathed through that mask for the first time. So we've talked about the history with masks in the Knights of Ren and how important thematically those cracked masks are to them. There was also the past Sith of Darth Momin who lived on by possessing his helmet. So the idea of masks and helmets having this kind of possessed darkness to them is something that we've seen in Star Wars before, but this seems specific to the Cortosis. Similar to the Beskar of the Mandalorians, Cortosis is something that seems like the inverse of the Kyber crystal. Like everything on this planet, it's something that is designed to obscure, to block, to make less clear. This episode was titled Teach/Corrupt, and I think we are left unclear among the teachers of this episode. Soul, Qimir, even Vernestra, whether they are truly teaching their pupils or lying to them and corrupting them to expect the worst from everyone. Where do you draw that line between teaching and indoctrination? Even though this planet probably isn't Ahch-To, I like that this episode at least reminds us visually of that planet, because for me, it definitely recalled this wonderful line from Yoda about teaching and failure.
The greatest teacher failure is. We are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters.
All of these teachers seem to have failed in their pasts, but so far, only Qimir has admitted it, and that admission of failure and his top muscles got him the furthest with his pupil. Comment down below with your thoughts, follow me at EA Voss, and subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.